So reverse mentoring, in my definition, is where we allow the novice to teach the master. I like to look at reverse mentoring in ensuring people who are underrepresented within any community are in a position where they can influence senior leaders by being a mentor.
Welcome to Another Door podcast. Another Door is a place that you come to when you're rethinking your work, whether it's job loss, a career change, or you just want to rethink how you are doing your work right now. Come and find us at anotherdoor.co.uk. This episode, I have Patrice Gordon on with me. Patrice, I have been stalking Patrice on LinkedIn for a while. She is a fellow Virgin Atlantica. So once you work for Virgin or maybe airlines, you don't really ever break away. Even when you leave, a part of you is still there. And you cannot help but follow what the organisation and its people are doing. And Patrice was part of Virgin. So when she started posting on LinkedIn about her new book and about some of the ideas and conversations that she has been starting with organisations, I got curious, bought the book, followed some of her work, and really wanted to get her on because she has a very different perspective on reverse mentoring. And it's fascinating, but obviously I don't want to just know about her book and that. I want to know about her backstory. She has gone from being finance director, very senior manager, commercial manager, to writing about people and human beings and behaviors and change in organizations. And that combination really captured my imagination as well. So we had a lot to talk about in terms of her career, some of the changes she's making, how she feels about it. Hope you enjoy the conversation. As usual, please leave a review. Please let us know what you think. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on Another Door, Patrice. Before we get stuck in, maybe a quick intro.
Hello, everyone. I am Patrice Gordon. I am now an author. I'm a commercial leader, a chartered accountant, and an executive coach. I believe in having organisations which are fair and equitable for all, but I don't think that should sit within a specialist function. I think that should be the responsibility of all leaders. And I'm really enjoying my journey at the moment in spreading the message about reverse mentoring, but more so around the fact that you don't necessarily end up where you thought you might end up in terms of your career.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God, already. Let me go. My brain's already disappearing down 100 back. Well, we always start Another Door podcast with another door moment for people because the listeners to Another Door are often going on their own career change journey, whatever that looks like. Sometimes it's just having a different relationship with work, or it is a door closing. But what's your Another Door moment?
My major one, which has helped me to pivot to the point I am today, is during the pandemic, I was, really increasingly frustrated about what was happening in society, the lack of responses from leaders, and the fact that something just wasn't really clicking. Like there was a socket and there was a plug, but something wasn't quite connecting in regards to the conversations I expected leaders to be having at senior levels in the organisation, given what happened in the US and Black Lives Matter, for example. And I sat and I brainstormed with a friend who's a colleague, who's a business partner, Hayley Bennett, and we really sat down and thought, right, actually, how do we use our voices as a force for good? I really, during the pandemic, realised how much weight my voice kind of carried and got a bit braver in terms of using it for good and to help people to listen. So I'd say that was my pivotal moment because I realised what my gift was, which is my voice and using my voice for good. And that opened the doors to lots of opportunities. And literally maybe a couple of months later, I was contacted by TED to do the TED Talk on reverse mentoring on something that I had done a year ago or so. It just came out of kind of me being confident in using my voice. And from then I've just got more and more confident in straddling this space between I am a very competent commercial leader, but also I have a voice and I have a unique vantage point and perspective as a Black female. And I should use that to amplify the voices, but also ensure that leaders they can't really shy away from the fact that actually we're not really where we should be. So I'd say that was my major my major door moment, which I have fully embraced now and I'm really leaning into.
It's made it sound so easy, but it really isn't, is it? You know, like, finding your voice. Oh, there it is. Let's go for it. I mean, oh God.
I have been in industry and a leader for almost 14 years now. And that only came, 2 years ago? So I think people think, oh my gosh, yeah, find your purpose. And, it looks really easy. But I mean, I've been at it for a while. And I think, you learn and you take solace and you take advice from people, but actually it's your journey to own. And it's really around how comfortable you feel about pushing the boundaries and the barriers. And I am a boundary and barrier pusher. I love rules, but I also love to actually challenge and rules or status quo. I think it's important for us to challenge those, but challenge them with perhaps some guidance in terms of how we could do things a little bit differently, which is actually one of the reasons why I joined Virgin Atlantic in the first place, just because I was pretty senior at across British Airways and Royal Mail, but something was missing for me, and that was my purpose. And it was about actually how do I leave a legacy within organisations and have my voice heard. So that was one of the reasons why I joined Virgin. I'm pleased to say that's obviously turned out very well for me.
Yeah, and that's where I found you, putting pictures of Virgin Atlantic, making me miss my old organisation. And saying, oh my God, I wish I was back there. But we were just discussing it is that sort of an organisation which is really hard to leave. In fact, I don't know if you ever leave.
Yeah, you don't. I think the Virgin family remains a part of you and you make some really good friends, which are turned into family, right?
Yeah, definitely. This is a labelling thing, which I'm going to probably step on, some things that I shouldn't step on. But you're a finance
okay,
senior leader. You don't do things like write books and talk about people.
I love this question. This is a box I'm trying to get myself out of, right? So just take you back to Patrice's very logical thinking. And I studied psychology and accounting at university. So I was always very conscious of my mathematical genius and I wanted to lean into that in accounting. And I've always just been a people person. I am curious about individuals. I'm curious about what makes people tick. I grew up as an only child. I say this on all the podcasts, but basically I've always had this curiosity to learn about other people. However, recognizing that I wanted a structured career because I'm incredibly structured. I knew that I could start in finance and then move into HR or psychology at a later date. Also, I think for my mental health and well-being, I think psychology is obviously very deep, and I think I probably would get into it in the utmost way that I probably could. And I think for my mental sanity, having the structure and then being able to dip into psychology is really important to me. And so the finance leader in me, I started in finance. I was like, okay, this is great. I can do this. And my unique skill set was that I'm great with the numbers, but I'm also great with people, which helped me to advance really quickly through the ranks because people saw me and they thought, oh, okay, yeah, she's finance, doing all this.
Something strange about this finance person.
She hold a conversation. She's quite personable. She understands the business. And she's not just looking at our numbers. And that really helped me in terms of being able to connect with people as a business partner, to be in those meetings and actually add value, not just what does the spreadsheet say, but actually how's this impacting people, the business, bringing in my business acumen as well. So I always wanted to be on that business side. And when I got to Royal Mail, I was finance director. Never thought I would be finance director. I was like, whoa, I have peaked in my career now. Where do I go? And then I thought to myself, right, actually now is the time, I think, for me to start to lean into that other side of me, which I was constantly getting this call in for. And it was actually, I was at BA at the time and Barefoot Coaching, they're this amazing coaching organization. They came in to work with BA and one of our suppliers we had really bad relationship with. And we had a 2-day immersion session where they really they did the pre-work. We had really good exercises in the session and we all left holding hands and singing Kumbaya. And I thought that is the kind of power that I want, to be able to bring people together, solve issues, really get to the crux of what the issue is and then leave people with, right, actually we've got a path forward to work on. And I'm a stickler for learning. I love to learn, but I also want to make sure that when I learn, I can put things into action straight away. So that's why it's kind of been on my list for about 6 years to like, I want to do this course. I want to become a coach. But I wasn't in the headspace to really utilize it. And so when I got to FD level, I thought, right, actually now's the time for me to lean into that side. Not, I peaked in terms of where I thought I would ever be in life. But actually, I thought this is the time for me to lean into that part. And then coincidentally, at that point, we had some restructures at Royal Mail. And then I decided an opportunity came out of Virgin. And I decided actually now's the right time for me to move. And that's when I joined Virgin, I kind of took a step back career-wise because the portfolio I was looking after was very similar to what I had at BA, but it gave me the headspace to finish my course, do my studies, and also start thinking about what I wanted that business to look like. So I always had the coaching. So from 2017, I always had the coaching part in the background. So I had a couple of clients, but obviously still had a full-time job as well. And so then it's always been that part of me where, the leadership consulting, inclusive leadership, living and breathing as a leader, I've always been conscious of that other side of me and making sure that I lean into that. And also I'm a role model to other leaders around as well. So I was the first non-HR person to be a facilitator for Springboard, which was our women's development program. It's a global program. And I love that because I'm like, actually, yeah, I'm in finance and I'm a finance leader, but also I'm contributing towards like helping other women in the organization become their best selves. And I think it was from that, plus I helped to introduce the first graduate apprentice scheme at Virgin for finance because we didn't have one. I was like, right, let's get it done. And brought people together to collaborate to get things done. I'm a real proponent of like working with individuals, bringing their best selves, putting their best foot forward and being able to complete stuff. And then that's how the opportunity came up with Craig to reverse mentor him because Estelle Hollinsworth, who's now Chief HR Officer, she had joined a couple of months before me and we kind of met informally. She was my mentor every kind of couple of months to just talk about our journeys and like how we can bring external best practice into Virgin. And one of the things that she suggested, I think through her team, was around reverse mentoring and what that would look like. And so Craig then didn't have any Black females in his inner circle or in his leadership team. And he was like, actually, I'd really welcome like Patrice's viewpoint. And that's how it all started. So when we talk about how did we get from finance to here, well, that's really it on a very long-winded story. But that's essentially how it happened. Always kind of showing up, doing things outside of my day job and doing things that you're passionate and you care about. And I think it's, for me, I always was like, right, this is my journey. I'm going to be an accountant. Like, I know where I'm going to be. And then when I think you surpass your own expectations and you're like, well, actually, yeah, what else can I do? And how else can I bring that level of like excellence to other things that I do, recognizing that I'm entering into these spaces as a novice. So when I moved into commercial, so I would say I moved from finance into commercial a couple of years ago as well. So that was a big step for me to like step away from the spreadsheet as the numbers and move into something else. And then this new journey of, author, like inclusive leader, coach, like that's also part of me. But, it does make me a little bit nervous sometimes because I'm like, right, I spent, 12 years honing my craft as a finance leader. And then now I'm venturing into these new spaces. But I've been doing lots of reading and, listening to lots of podcasts. And it's really about, the sum total of like the magic that you can bring when you're multidimensional as opposed to actually just feeling like you can just be one thing. So, you grow up thinking, jack of all trades and master of none. But actually, when you fill that out a little bit more, you recognize the value that you can drive from being multifaceted, right?
Yeah, definitely. I like what you say a little bit about seeing the bigger picture of your career, good old squiggly career there in the middle, where actually I think we can get a bit stuck in corporate life of being linear and everything has to be promotion and bigger and bigger and bigger. But you actually took not just a sidestep, but a completely different route to coming to Virgin for a different purpose. I think that's a really powerful decision. How did you kind of navigate through that? Because our ego can be saying one thing and our head would be going, no, this is the right thing, but our heart isn't. How did you navigate through that?
There was a few things. I mean, I was commuting. I had a 3-hour commute every day. I was living in the countryside at that point, and I was coming into London 3 hours every day. The best money I've ever had, best bonuses I've ever had, the highest point in my career. But then you have to balance it off with happiness, right? And purpose. And so I'm in a very fortunate and privileged position that I was able to make that decision to step into more of my purpose, or the opportunity for me to live through my purpose. And also recognizing that I was investing in this other part of me, which I recognized I needed the headspace to be able to do.
Yeah.
So it was financially, like, actually, how can I afford it to take that step back? Mental health and well-being and time. I was saving myself like at 2 hours every single day, so like less of a commute. But most importantly, recognizing I think there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow in your life. And that was a point where I just really needed to sow the seeds to build myself in this alternative viewpoint that I wanted to invest in. And also, worst case scenario, I can always go back. Like I was confident in myself that actually if that didn't work out, or if I wanted to like go and be a CFO somewhere else, I could actually do that. And that, every single experience that we have, I don't think anything is wasted. Especially when you regardless of whether it's been forced onto you, like how do you take that opportunity and lead into it? But then if it's a conscious decision, when you're having an interview and explaining why you make those choices, I think, it all adds value to you and yourself as a CV in the end point anyway. But yeah, the ego part, I think, once you get to a certain level and when you've been hit and knocked a few times, you really have to give yourself an ego check yourself without someone having to give it to you. And having people around you who know and love you and you can bounce ideas off that are not egocentric or driven by ego, but know that actually for me, like, I had some nice stuff going on as well. And I think your mental health and well-being is like utmost important. So, whether it's like a 3-hour commute down to a 1 hour, and then I've got time to like go to the gym or walk the dog for longer and do some more studying without feeling like you're constantly like trying to fit everything in. I think when you're in that pivotal point in your career, you probably experience this where you're like, actually, I've got so much to do and I'm constantly trying to pigeonhole things in like every second of every day. And that is really high stress, that's really high stress. And you're not in the moment. I was always thinking about like what we got to do next, like constantly like this. And part of my promise to myself over the past few years, especially with the pandemic, is to be a little bit more present and to like make decisions which fills your soul, right? Which fills your soul and you feel comfortable and happy with, which is great on the most part. I don't get there all the time, but that's always my intention.
Oh, that's nice. That's a really nice way of putting it, fill your space with the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
Not just kind of following a pre-programmed path that we think success is, break that. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing I liked about your book, so I really liked it. It was so practical. That's the first thing that hits you. Is like, wow, this feels possible.
I had imposter syndrome. I have had several moments where, I read a lot and I love like the research because I can then bring it in, but I also like practical, like how do I just get this thing done? And I was really conscious that, my experience and the conversations I've had and the research I've done has been done over the space of maybe 2 to 3 years. And for other people who have been in this space for so much longer, they've been spending like 10, 15, 20 years on this research. And so I had to reframe it for myself, which is actually, how do I take all of this great knowledge and research and amplify it and use it as like a baseline foundation for then people just to get on with it? Because I think on two hands, one, some people love the research and they're like, give me like the absolute endpoint detail so that I can understand it. And then I think right now we have a lot of people who are like, right, I just need to get on with stuff.
Yeah.
And I was really keen to make sure that this book was in the hands of people like, right, okay, how do we start? Obviously, I'm up for consulting and helping people pull it in, but actually my whole thing is, after hearing some of the really like hard stories of people who've been put in a position to be like a mentor and it hasn't worked out very well, and organizations really just having some blind spots around actually how do we do this in the right way, is to give them this book to just pique their interest and ask them questions of themselves in terms of like, how can we do this a little bit more safely than we would have done if we didn't have the book in the first place. So I'm really glad that a lot of people I'm speaking to, like, it's really practical. And I was like, does that mean it's just really simple? But actually what we need it to be is simple so that people can take it and then use it. So I'm really pleased with that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely, the word definitely I was thinking is possible, the possibility, because sometimes books just feel so overwhelming, like the writer has written everything that they found out and you feel so overwhelmed at the end of all sorts of things. I think, oh my God, and but this, no, you felt like, God, if I was in an organization, I'd be really keen to give this a go. And as you say, in a safe environment. Are you looking for somebody to help you rethink your work? Are you looking for somebody who has got something to say, something different? Perhaps you're creating an event, you've got a conference coming up, and you're looking for speakers or workshops that really get people rethinking. Check out our platform with fresh new voices and people who've got something to say. Come and see us at recommended.anotherdoor.co.uk. Maybe we should just clarify for people who haven't read the book yet, because you can read the book. What is reverse mentoring? Maybe we should just cover that for people.
Yeah, of course. So reverse mentoring, in my definition, is where we allow the novice to teach the master. Historically, it started off with age, it's moved into gender, but I like to look at reverse mentoring in ensuring people who are underrepresented within any community are in a position where they can influence senior leaders by being a mentor. So the mentee takes the position of, I am the novice, I am the senior leader in the organization, but I recognize I have some gaps, and really giving it an opportunity to amplify those voices of underrepresented individuals. So throughout the book, we talk about lots of different forms of underrepresentation, and it can be applied to all of them, obviously with certain safeguards in place.
I think that's the thing. The safeguards comes out really strongly, and a proper structure, because you can imagine in some organizations, and I'm curious to know if you've come across any in your research, that it's just impossible for that culture to absorb that. They're so hierarchical. They're so just, I don't know, something's ingrained in there that it's impossible to penetrate. But I'm curious if you've kind of come across that.
Yes. I think where in organizations where it's incredibly hierarchical, there are lots of people in there who want to really break that hierarchy and who want to kind of step over some of those levels. And where I found it to work really well is where there are a couple of advocates within the organization. So it's usually people who are members of certain employee resource groups or certain leaders who have come in from the outside to say, actually, hold on a second, this is just we need to break this and we need to figure out how we can hear and listen from different people. So particularly within consultancy firms and also within government as well. So if you can imagine, within government, there are, it's incredibly hierarchical, but there's two projects that I've kind of had the privy of reviewing and being involved in, where a real small cohort of individuals have taken it upon themselves to prove the process and the program works, and then other areas have taken it on board. And I think it's a real dual focus, because in those severely hierarchical organizations, it takes that nucleus of individuals who want to drive change to bring it forward and to give the example of how it can work, versus in some other organizations where the leadership team might be a little bit more open to that for them to drive it through that perspective. So I think it depends on where the culture sits. And, my view would be that everyone needs to do it. But ultimately, we have to be happy with some of these nucleuses just working and changing from internal, inside out to drive change. So I used to be like, oh my God, I would change the whole organization. All organizations need to do this. But then I've recognized that actually that's not practical. And where it works really well. And instead of it being forced, it being started from kind of grassroots, where people have a genuine interest and commitment to drive change, because ultimately it's hard work. Change is hard work in whichever way, shape or form. And so having committed individuals who get it and recognize it's not going to be easy is really key.
Yeah, that's what kind of struck me thinking about it, because you can imagine, it's a very special leader that is already in that space of openness, like, okay, I'm ready to be told I might be doing something wrong. I might have to relearn something. I might have to fess up that I've thought a belief or something. That's a very special person. I'd probably say quite unique person. But I guess you can do groundwork. I mean, you're an executive coach, so this is what you do. You do the groundwork with people to open up.
Exactly. But I would also, I bring in, like, I think this is where my finance and business piece really helps, because it's not just you're an executive coach and that's what you've done.
Yeah.
It's like I've sat in the room and I've understood some of those conversations, but I understand leadership behavior as well. And I think, when I talk about, and, this topic is emotive, but inclusive, the diversity, equity and inclusion conversation is emotive. But when we liken it to the growth mindset or the 10X that we would use from a commercial perspective to that drive change and drive like business process change, these leaders say, like, we need to drive, we need to have this growth mindset. We need to change the way that we've done things, especially with the pandemic. That has made us reset quite a few things that we thought was true. We've now had to rethink. And I just kind of flip it into, right, okay, if we can do that for business and we can employ that growth mindset model for how you want your team to behave and change and drive higher results, actually from a personal perspective, how do we move through that growth mindset in terms of changing ideas and ideals around what you've grown up with and what we need to adjust our mind to in order to move forward. So, individual coaching, but also I do preparation sessions with both the leaders and with the mentors to get them into the mindset of, like, actually, what does this mean? Like, how can you, when we looked at the pandemic and the results and the research that have coming out of the requirements and the competencies that leaders need, it's around, empathy, compassion, emotional intelligence. And you can't do that without being incredibly self-aware and kind of opening yourself up to the fact that you do not have all the answers and you need to learn. And I think looking at, surveys, etc., it's all also showing from an employee perspective, they are requiring organizations to step up where the government doesn't step up now. Or, from a societal perspective, the responsibility on organizations is the greatest that it has ever been. So we can't have that societal expectation without the leaders understanding society a little bit more.
That's powerful. And that self-awareness is huge. You can't just read a book or watch a TED talk or something and then get it. You've got to do the work. You've got to tap into yourself. Where's your resistance coming from?
What makes you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah. You can't do that on your own either, I don't feel.
No, I don't think. And some of the sessions that we hold where it's, we create that safe space because we want them to have that conversation amongst themselves with facilitation. And it's, they go away, they take it back. We have check-ins throughout the programs. And it's interesting to see, because this is not just a work thing. This is your whole person. And so, it's how you behave and contribute towards the work ecosystem, but also the societal at home ecosystem as well. And I think this is obviously why it touches the nerves, because it's not just like, okay, this is the hat that I put on when I come to work. This is like a challenge to your whole self, which can't separate necessarily from work and home. And I was speaking to a leader the other day, and she was like the chief diversity officer. And she's like, the problem we have is that for a lot of organizations, people have gone through life without really having these challenges or having these challenging conversations. And their home circle, their personal circle, is still very much how they would have chosen it to be. So maybe not as diverse as the organization is, right? So actually their learning ground is the organization versus like their home or their personal life, which is, so having that in like your workspace, your learning ground being in your organization, it's a big responsibility for organizations as well. But there's no really getting away from it now, because it's actually that status quo doesn't really exist anymore. We have to continually challenge it and make sure that our leaders are equipped to have those conversations. So yeah, I think it's a big responsibility on organizations right now.
Yeah, and as you say, supporting people through it, because you're right, sometimes you can't go home and discuss things, because that's going to take your whole energy, your whole conversation, your whole thinking into a different space. A group think exists, you know, it exists. So yeah, having an organization that creates a completely different network and conversation. And I kind of feel like it's almost freeing people up to, you're allowed to make mistakes more, you're allowed to ask silly questions, all the things that we think you shouldn't do in an organization because it might damage your performance or your perception. What you're kind of talking about makes me feel like, well, that's now where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always around that caveat of safe space, right? Which is where people come to the table respectfully, and they are comfortable in sharing their naivety in a safe space, but also, most importantly, they are prepared to do the work. So it's kind of, you know, coming to the table with the fact that, right, I've got all of these ingredients. I need you to help me make them sense so I can understand the full picture of it. And I think it's that really delicate balance, because, you know, there's, you know, some leaders who turn up like, right, I've signed up to this, I'm here, like, what more do you want from me? And then you've got other leaders who are like, right, I'm here, tell me what you need from me. Like, I've done this, I've done that. I need some helping to pull it together. And it's trying to get those leaders, you know, along the continuum of, right, actually, this is not just a tick box. We actually have to put some heart, literally have to put some heart into this in order for us to get the best results for you and for the organization. Because my biggest learning and the biggest concern is around the mentors, really. It's about those junior or all those underrepresented individuals who are laying their lived experience on the line and really being in a position, you know, all of these, every single mentor I spoke to, including myself, got involved because they wanted to make sure that their voice was heard, their group's voice was heard, and that they were able to leave or drive change within an organization so that the people coming up behind them didn't have the same experience as them. And so when you look at it in that way, those individuals are incredibly vested in driving organizational change and being heard. And so my concern is really around the safeguarding of them, to make sure that when the leaders come, they are in the right mindset to be able to make the most out of that relationship, and also drive action from those conversations. So you know, the main part of, you know, the research and the conversations I held were like, it was great. You know, we did lots of listening, like leaders feel like they understand people better. Great. Now what? Like, now what? You know, and people are, you know, the mentors, not just the mentors, but the groups that they belong to are waiting for this drop of like epiphany that things will change and things will be better. And so we know that change doesn't happen overnight, but there are definitely some actions that can be taken in the short term, which will lead to sustainable change in the long term. So it's really that balance with me and me challenging the leaders to say, right, okay, so what we're going to do with this information, how do we keep those conversations going? Because actually what happens is those really vested individuals, if change doesn't happen and change doesn't occur, they will move on, they will become despondent. The feedback within the organization, within those groups and within wider groups, we know like bad news travels quicker than good news, is like everyone's going to be waiting for like, right, so what we're going to do? And if nothing happens, then it's just another one of those interventions where they are listened to, and it's like the emotional burden of like trying to change and drive things when people aren't genuinely listening. So that's something that I do challenge organizations on, in terms of like, so what's the plan for afterwards, to make sure that they have a solid intention, at least, of what, you know, what changes they're prepared to do in terms of what they hear and how far they're prepared to go. So yeah, it's a challenging one.
I guess it's the integration, isn't it? So that it becomes just part of how you do business. It's part of just any other part of the business. That's the whole goal, because if it keeps sitting as part of a separate thing, it'll always be an initiative.
Yeah.
With everything that's attached to initiative syndrome. So
got some things shiny and new.
Exactly. You know, that I've been comms for a long time. You know, put things up on posters, shiny, happy people, and then it disappears. But the things that really last are the things that get integrated, and suddenly it becomes, that's just the way it's done around here.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does it feel to you? Because you're in the middle of this, you know, you've been promoting your book, you're having these real live conversations.
I genuinely do feel like we are stagnating a little bit. So there's a few things that I really chuckle at or get really annoyed at. And one of them is
thin line,
which is, you know, the business case for diversity, or, you know, the recent Lean In and McKinsey report on women at work. I mean, it is, you know, we have the few days where people are like so surprised at the results. But are they really? Like, why should we be surprised? Because actually not really that much has changed. Yeah. And I think, you know, I talk about DEI as a whole, but when we look at gender and we look at the fact that, you know, the gender pay gap has been there for how many years? The research has been there for how many years? The interventions as to how we can fix this gender pay gap is very evident and very clear. And the pay gap exists because women get paid less than men, but organizations have within their toolkit an ability to correct that. And yet still it's not being done. So when we look at it in some, like, gender is emotive, but it's also very factual, right? So if we have this abundance of research and the ability to correct it and it's still not being done, that part just boggles me, right? Yeah. It boggles me because we could in one fell swoop correct that. Organizations within their toolkit and within their power have the ability to correct it to like a 95% level. There's obviously complications involved in it, but they have the ability to do that and they're still not doing it. So when it comes to other forms of equity, I don't think it's a surprise that we haven't moved forward in any, you know, greater way, because it is the more emotive piece. And it's also around those that are in positions of power feeling threatened by the fact that they will need to share their power. They will need to share their power or use their power for good. And I think in the past 2 years, that has become more and more evident of those with power being unwilling to use it. Because I think historically or previously, when it comes to particularly from a race and a sexuality point of view, for example, the blinkers have slightly been on and it's been like, we didn't know, or like we're doing unconscious bias training, that should be enough. But I think the stark facts that have been prevalent over the past few years have made it very clear that those in power and those in positions of power are not using their power for good to drive change. And I think the latest like LinkedIn report, I've read it and I use it as, you know, in all of my presentation and so forth to kind of drive that message home. But for me, that's just like, hands to head and like heads in hands of like, there's not really, what more do you want? Like, what more research do you want? Like, how more do you want it to be proven? But really the question is now on those leaders, like, what are you going to do with the information that you have? And so in that respect, I do feel like we've gone backwards and have stagnated because I don't think we've ever had as much information and as much research, as much conversation as we have been able to have in the past 2 years, but yet still we are lacking in those in power really using their power for good. But I think that whole joining forces for the power to be greater is the sticking point for many leaders.
Yeah, they feel threatened. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think, as you say, maybe a pause or, as you say, a bit stagnant at the moment. Again, it's part of change. I think change always, whatever change happens, has this moment where everyone's like, yeah. And then you have, whoa, hang on a minute. Yeah. Oh, no, not me, though. Yeah. Oh, God, shit. No, I didn't. I mean, no, I spread my hands.
You're talking about me. That's just, yeah, absolutely.
But me, oh, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, that's definitely the space that we're in right now. It's like, oh, actually, the dust has settled and you've realised, well, actually, if I need to do this, it means that. But, there are some great leaders, great individuals who are in positions of power who are really using that to drive change. And I think more of that advocacy, but also, you see the benefits and the joy of having a truly diverse workforce and a truly diverse leadership team, because the questions and the challenges that are asked are just so much deeper and just carry so much more weight and change. So I think, holding those, I think it will also take time for the fact that diversity to reach the top of the organization. And for people, I use Timothy Clark's 4 stages of psychological safety, which is ultimately we want to get to the end point, which is challenger safety. Because when you get to a point where you're not only allowed in the room and you're around the table, you can agree, you can give your point of view and you can be listened to, but ultimately challenger safety is when you feel so comfortable being in that room that you can challenge the status quo, you can challenge, other leaders with confidence in that that your role is not going to be at risk, but you're not going to be ostracized when you share that view. And ultimately, I have observed, and myself actually, when I've entered into spaces, when I first became a finance director, I had no doubt that I was more than qualified to be in that room, but I had to tread really carefully to gain my confidence from actually I'm allowed in the room safety and I'm at the table, versus actually, no, I'm really, really confident that I know this really well. And what I'm going to say is really valid. And I'm going to say it in a way which is confident, not, aggressive. Just Patrice is like the ultimate peacekeeper, right? So I had the way with words, which shouldn't really offend individuals, but I can do the dance incredibly well, which is why I've got to the point that I've got to. But ultimately that challenger safety is where we need to get to, because that when you get to that point, that's when you're really going to drive change and you're going to drive innovation, because the people around the room have that mutual respect for each other's opinions. And that's where we're going to be able to kind of say, well, actually, that doesn't really make sense. And they're open and listening to the alternative viewpoint, which is where we need, everybody who's coming through the pipelines now to get to that point where they feel they can challenge effectively without feeling ostracized.
There's so many strands to this that I hope people connect to. Your story of being squiggly, we all love squiggly these days. And I love that about the thing that kind of really connect with is you don't have to be linear to be success. Sometimes you have to create space for other things to come in. And that is exactly what you've done. And now having this bigger voice, and I love what you said at the beginning, finding your voice on something that you feel so passionate about is really powerful. And where can people find you? Obviously, I've got the book and I'll put the show notes, but where else can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram. I'm Ms. Patrice Gordon. On LinkedIn, obviously, just search for Patrice Gordon. And the website, which is still kind of under construction, is www.eminere.co.uk. So that's EMINERE.co.uk.
Oh, perfect. And I will put links in so people can find you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Are you looking for somebody to help you rethink your work? Are you looking for somebody who has got something to say, something different? Perhaps you're creating an event, you've got a conference coming up, and you're looking for speakers or workshops that really get people rethinking. Check out our platform with fresh new voices and people who've got something to say. Come and see us at recommended.anotherdoor.co.uk. Love this podcast? Give us a 5-star review or rate us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. It can really help us make more great content like this episode and get it out to a wider audience.